the AI Applied Consortium podcast. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about, what this podcast is about for those of you who haven't listened to it. And then I will introduce my esteemed guest. And I think we have a very interesting topic to cover in the form of what is top of mind for many individuals, which is the moving target of tariffs and their impact on all sorts of different organizations, and how AI can help with understanding tariffs and kind of locking in on that moving target. So this is, I think, episode 5 or 6. I should probably know this by now since there's only a few episodes. But we've been trying to reach our consortium ecosystem with interesting speakers across different domain expertise, talking about artificial intelligence across a variety of different lenses. So our opening speaker was the Chancellor of Penn State, and we went through different industries, academics, technologists, and really the goal is to maybe not get thousands of viewers, we're not quite there yet, on any given session, but rather to have this as a basis for you to engage the consortium on areas of interest, and again, tariffs being one of those areas. And I have with me a very well-respected individual. His name is Daniel Gardner. He's a senior leader in logistics. He's worked for DHL, Global Forwarding, and other organizations. He has a recognized industry book on specifically titled Supply Chain Vector on supply chain. And I had the pleasure of being introduced to him a few months ago through our association with the National Association of Wholesalers. And we've been working together behind the scenes on different areas of applications of AI and tariffs. So without further ado, Dan, I probably didn't get all of your rich knowledge here summarized in 2 or 3 paragraphs, but I wanted you to kind of level set the conversation, both by extending anything that I missed that is relevant in terms of your background, and also setting the stage for us specifically on this idea of the moving target of tariffs and the fact that that moving target is still moving, and maybe tell us, how it's moving, how tariffs are still top of mind and should be top of mind for our listeners today.
Sure thing. Thank you, Konrad. Greetings, everybody. As Konrad said, my name is Dan Gardner. Very happy to be with you all here today. I'm actually tuning in from Southern California, right next to the Los Angeles Long Beach Port Complex. That's not a coincidence. I've lived and worked here in California for 20 years, always in global supply chain, global logistics, trade compliance, which of course encompasses import tariffs. Originally from Massachusetts, so you might detect a slight New England accent there, but can't shake that. But in my career, had the good fortune to travel around a little bit, been to 70 countries multiple times, China, lost count. So don't claim to know everything, but have some pretty decent exposure to topics like tariffs. For the record, I am a licensed customs broker through U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That means I'm licensed by the federal government to engage in import activities with importers, and it implies a certain level of knowledge, hopefully, that will be demonstrated in our conversation today. So that's really just an intro and background. But tariffs, of course, even going into the election late last year and the promise from the Trump administration to use tariffs as a bargaining tool in trade negotiations and such, has created a level of uncertainty that is carried through. Hard to believe it's July 1st, Konrad. We were talking about this the other day, that the year is half over chronologically, but from a planning and budgetary perspective for business people, it's already over. So when you're dealing with uncertainty around tariffs, meaning what are they? When do they come into place? When do they arbitrarily get moved, et cetera, just creates a lot of dissonance on behalf not only of importers, but the entire ecosystem, whether it's customs brokers, shipping companies, steamship lines, etc. So where we stand today, and we can jump into some further questions from here. Your viewers might recall seeing on the news or your own online or what have you, back in April, as recently when President Trump implemented reciprocal tariffs. That was when he was on TV, had the big placards with the list of all the countries and what have you. Most of those got postponed. So the first round, and that postponement was for 90 days. So the first round of postponed or delayed tariffs actually expire on July 8th. So there's a big time level of uncertainty about what's going to happen, and trade deals you hear on the news now with Japan, a deal that was allegedly done with the UK some weeks back, a separate deal that was postponed until August 12th, specific to China. So this whole practice of, I don't know if it's the right term, but kicking the can down the road from a tariff perspective, business people really prefer certainty. And international business people, especially, because a lot more can go wrong in an international transaction as opposed to a domestic transaction. So that's where we are today, and somewhat fits into the context of how can artificial intelligence, and especially machine learning, can be used not to eliminate uncertainty, but to help plan, mitigate risk, things of this nature, as we've discussed before.
Right. Dan, I try to do my limited due diligence on some of these things that you'd be bringing up, including the pause on reciprocating tariffs. And I GPT'd it. And I think maybe it gave me July 9th, actually, maybe because it thinks that's when it goes through July 8th. But anyways, I don't believe GPT all the time either.
GPT is not hallucinating. It actually goes in July.
Right.
Fire on the 8th, go in on the 9th.
Right, exactly. So, I think I want to just open up a little bit on this moving target and why it's difficult for people like yourself and organizations to keep up. And we talked about this a little bit in terms of the sustainable value of why AI is important. And to me, it's not just in the work that we're doing maybe in the short term, which has a lot more forward-thinking like ideas behind it, right? So it's not just the functions we implement today in AI, but rather the broader ability of AI to lock into that moving target and continue to follow it and aggregate information. So, can you, as an expert in trade and supply chain, tell me what is your biggest challenge that AI might be able to help with?
Yeah, that's a broad subject. How long's this podcast for? We might run out of time.
Start with the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah. Well, if you think about supply chain, you really, to talk about the application of AI, at least I think, to international trade, and that's really international trade and global supply chain, for purposes of this conversation, are synonymous terms. You really have to put a tactical definition on supply chain. And as we've also discussed previously, supply chain in a 1 year period, when people are buying and selling goods, the rubber hits the road, goods are shipping, they're going through customs, they're paying duties, etc. Supply chain is an exercise in predicting the future. So there's an immediate value for artificial intelligence to the extent that past events are indicative of future outcomes, a topic that becomes very important. What does any of that even mean? Well, imagine my favorite example is a jeans importer here in Southern Cal that forever imported their jeans from China, and due to the tariffs on China from 2018, shifted their production to places like Vietnam and India. They have to create a sales forecast over a 1 year period for how many pairs of jeans, of how many different styles they think they're going to sell. That's a prediction of the future. And then goods actually start moving. People go to stores, they buy merchandise, they buy things online. So you can have a record of actual sales that can be compared with forecasted sales to determine the variance. And this has been the holy grail of supply chain forever, to minimize the variance between what we thought was going to happen and what is actually happening from a sales perspective. So to the extent that machine learning, as an example, can access training data that is indicative of recent past sales, because sales from 10 years ago aren't going to matter for what's going on in the next quarter, and uncover patterns perhaps make predictions and even decisions about quantities to buy in or what countries to source from based on tariffs on an individual country basis. That's just one example of what we're talking about. That's a little further down the road, but there's already AI being used, for example, in predictive analytics about the arrival time of ships. Is the ship going to comply with its estimated time of arrival? Is it going to arrive early? But these things really matter in a tactical supply chain environment. So there's already work being done in that area. But for me, anything that you can access recent past data that is correlated at a level higher than 0.8 to future outcomes becomes super valuable. Not only structured data, but also unstructured data. Things like evaluations online of a product or an influencer speaking highly of a product, and sales are going to go crazy based on those influencers. So structured and unstructured data, labeled and unlabeled data becomes really important too.
Yeah, I love that you unpack this in the verbiage of, past performance does actually provide future results, right, or future predictions, and it's kind of the basis of that is that in order for you to effectively and confidently say that statement, you have to be looking at past performance in all the causal ways that is relevant, and a lot of the historical tech didn't allow you to do that. Like you even led further down the relevant technological rabbit hole, which is unstructured data, and how unstructured data in the form of natural language, statements made by different types of, reports or otherwise, plays an important role to understand the causal elements and potentially predict the future. But it's often, or historically, it was never used in like traditional predictive analytics. And so maybe we can unpack that one more level. And I'm just curious because this is unrehearsed, so you'll be able to give me all my answers. By the way, I got a mic for the first time on the podcast that I stole. I think I mentioned this from my son because he has a YouTube channel, but I'm already not used to the spacing of this. I think I hit it twice. Hopefully, it didn't affect the audio quality. But it is I think, hopefully providing better audio. So let's unpack a little bit more of like this unstructured data. Where does it sit today? Like, and what is this? Why is it so difficult to get to at scale? Is it because there's too much of it? It's in distributed sources that are not fully recognized, so you have to search for it. Is that kind of your role in some respect as an expert, to look for this information actively and pull it and aggregate it and analyze it? Or if it's not, like, why is it so difficult to historically get to this information? Why hasn't this been done?
I think it's a little bit of all of the above in terms of different sources of data, the timeliness of data, the relevance. Everybody's an influencer today. But if someone goes online and makes a positive comment about a new style of jean that I'm that importer I spoke of a moment ago, and I don't even know that happened, and the momentum from that could increase my sales by 100,000 units a month because a legitimate influencer made that statement. Imagine the value in knowing that and not have to be randomly kind of hanging around looking for sources of information. So the timeliness and relevance becomes really important. And the same goes for a negative comment about a product. It could be that we have to back off the level of imports we have. So you have to be able to put a value on the veracity or the impact of what, and this is just one case, in the case of an influencer is saying. On a more practical level, it's in the moment information that becomes really important that people never had access to before, because let's say in the last 7-8 year period, and it takes time for businesses to catch up to technology, they never had access to some of this technology anyway. So a perfect example of this, and we're getting a little bit in the weeds, but it's super important from an international trade perspective, and certainly both imports and exports, is when containers, ocean freight containers, come in filled chock full of jeans from the port of Cat Lo in southern Vietnam. When cargo is clearing through customs, duties are being paid, which could also benefit from AI, as we discussed a moment ago. and there's communication between multiple parties about the status of a container. Has it cleared through customs? What's going on at a given terminal? A lot of terminals in the U.S., ocean terminal now, require an appointment to be able to pick up a full container. The communication that goes on WhatsApp, but between a truck dispatcher and multiple drivers that are sharing data about congestion at a given port, or a wildcat work stoppage at a given terminal. Super important, super valuable. But I mean, WhatsApp's been around for a while, but the extent to which people used it is really just starting to intensify now. So I think that's contributed as well. So the ability, not only on a sales perspective, influencers talking positively about a product or some other type of event, at an operational tactical level, to be able to access this information in the moment and use it for immediate future potential outcomes, something that might not mean much to an American consumer, but means a lot to people in my line of work, is I have an appointment to pick up a container at a terminal, multiple containers, and all the appointments have been canceled and the line is 6 hours long. This matters a lot. So be able to use that in the moment, but also potentially use it to predict future outcomes. For example, the busiest day of the week at Terminal A at the Port of Los Angeles is Wednesday afternoon. That's a pattern of behavior that can be uncovered not only through structured data, but unstructured data as well.
So then I have a layman question, and I'm going to confess beforehand, I probably should have read all your book. I only read about a third of it, but I'm getting there. So maybe if I read a little further, I'd have the answer to this question, but I'm going to go in with the 101 question. So you mentioned like these, I'll call them like leading indicators for dimensions of supply chain and demand, right? How does that tie back to like mitigation and actionable things around tariffs? Like, am I looking at these data points because if I know these data points, I can take proactive steps ahead of some shifting tariff targets so that I can save on change in tariff in the delta of the tariff that might change in the future? Is that part of those actionable steps that I get out of better prediction?
Yes, there's a couple ways you can apply that.
I'm glad I got that right in part.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I was shooting in the dark. Okay.
And if you make it through halfway through that book and you haven't fallen asleep yet, let me know, because I think that would be a first. It's a little on the detail.
Well, now it's actually nighttime reading, so every time I read it, I fall asleep. But it's nothing to do with the book.
I'm glad to have been able to contribute to your quality of life. This is important, however it might be achieved. But in all seriousness, if you think about tariffs, which is an import tax, let's clarify one thing. It's the importer that pays the tariff, not the country overseas, not the seller overseas. It's the U.S. importer of record. So in my hypothetical jeans importing company here in Wilmington, California, I'm importing, I'm paying 10% tariffs on jeans coming out of Vietnam versus 55% on jeans coming out of China, because the tariff will vary based on country of origin. That matters a lot. So imagine a scenario where I resign myself to, okay, we switch to Vietnam right now, at least until July 9th. The tariff's going to be 10%. Could go up to 25, could go up to 50. We don't know. The last thing I want to do is subject myself to tariffs and then overbuy from an inventory perspective. I buy 100,000 pairs. I've already resigned myself to the fact that I have to pay the tariffs. I'm going to increase my price on the jeans by 10% and let the cards fall where they may. But what I don't want to do is buy 100,000 pairs of jeans when the data is out there, structured or unstructured, that would indicate pretty dramatically that sales were only going to be 75,000 pair. Why would I buy the 100,000 on my forecast? So I think that's one good example there. I'm not so sure about predictive analytics as it relates to future tariff application, because nobody knows. I don't think the authors of these tariffs know, to be honest with you. So a little hard to predict, but to be able to make comparisons as it stands today between an India, a Vietnam, China, Eastern, Western Europe, because again, tariffs will vary by country of origin and by product. So that gene example where I said 10% Vietnam, 55% China, that's a real number. Right. So, how do you make that shift? What are the actual costs? How can you calculate those costs? How can you use recent historical data and AI to make predictions about what those costs are really going to be? How can we use recent AI data to predict actual arrival times of ships so we can get containers in a timely fashion? There's a bunch of different ways that these things can be applied, and not just through machine learning, whereas that's my particular area of focus, but also in robotics and computer vision as well.
Right. Yeah. And I love how you said that, like the aspect of, to me, the way I interpret it is that tariff future state is unknown. And so all you can do there is maybe understand it more promptly and more comprehensively, right? Which is going to be a good lead into what we're going to talk about next. But there are data points that are known, leading indicators that are known in the form of these examples that you mentioned, including the influencers, liking a gene or otherwise, some sort of supply chain components of importing through ports. So those variables you can mitigate. And when you mitigate those variables, that's, it's kind of like anything in life, you can control what you can control, and some things you can't control, sort of thing. And I think that's a really nice way of articulating that.
Well, even applying probability to future outcomes. A perfect example, and today, July 1st, 2025. Happy early 4th of July, by the way.
Yeah, happy early 4th of July.
And, on the trade news, and, I get all kinds of feeds, and I pay a lot of attention to this stuff because this is what I do for a living.
Right.
But the news is, what's going to be the outcome of trade with Japan. And a big sticking point is the export of U.S. rice to Japan, which apparently through some drought issues and what have you, had experienced a domestic shortage thereof. So imagine, at least on a macro level, to be able to use AI to analyze past negotiations about things like quotas on U.S. rice going into Japan, what the duty rates were going into Japan, to at least come up with a likelihood, probability of what a trade deal is going to look like and what the components are going to be thereof. It's not all the pieces of the puzzle, but it provides some pretty good sized pieces of the puzzle that you can continue to drill down on, consider other variables. Because here's the thing, if I'm Mr. Jeans guy, and that's our example for today, and I sell to companies like Walmart, Target, and it's basically white, jeans. I manufacture the jeans in Asia, but it's under a Walmart. It doesn't even matter. Through retail chains, through online chains other than my own, if I want to have my jeans good to go for in-store or online shopping for back to school, I placed the order on those jeans 3 months ago. So you're rolling the dice from a purchasing perspective, and you really, I don't want to say you're guessing, but you're kind of guessing in an uncertain world. Do I place the order for the jeans on India, or do I place them on Vietnam in our example, knowing that in 6 months' time, reciprocal tariffs will have expired twice, and goodness knows what some of the other tariffs are going to be. So have just a little bit of help, a little bit of predictability, probabilistic tools, using AI on a macro and micro level certainly wouldn't hurt. I don't know if it's going to solve the entire equation, but it certainly wouldn't hurt.
So, Dan, this is a great lead-in to another important topic, and it's probably going to be played back as functional requirements from you to our other groups that we're working together on. So some of you that have been following the consortium probably have seen us showcase a little bit of an initiative that was born through our relationship with a few different bodies or organizations, one being the National Association of Wholesalers, and also some other groups that we're a part of as well. And that's an initiative called Tariff 360, which is an AI-powered tool that we are building out incrementally with the capabilities of being able to aggregate information online, unstructured data, then, as you put it. And also, in part, I think it does a little bit of what you mentioned on some of these auxiliary variables of prediction, like it can scrape social feeds and things like that, and look at sentiment and position posture of competitors. And now that you gave an idea of influencers for particular product types, I think there's probably, again, it's intended to be agnostic in the way that we built it. So some of the test runs we did with it was like a second tier automotive manufacturer. I'm pretty sure there isn't too many influencers putting out, the aluminum cast influence. I love this aluminum cast part for my transmission, but I think it definitely applies for specific retail space, right? And we're going to probably, based on this conversation, I'm going to ask everyone to listen to this in our development group. So this is kind of a level set. We've been building this together. Together maybe only for a few weeks, but we've had conversations about it for a little bit over a month and a half, I believe. But we have this team, University of Kentucky, DePaul University, Consortium Technology Ecosystem, yourself as a domain expert, some folks from National Association of Wholesalers. I just finished talking to an individual from the Pittsburgh World Trade Center, that is also interested in supporting kind of as a domain expert. And we're launching beta trials in a few months. So that was my product placement. I'll stop now. But I wanted to get your thoughts on, not the application, because we've talked about this for quite some time, but rather specifically on how do you envision a tool like this being used? And who do you think is interested in this? Who do you think will be interested in a tool like this? Based on what you've articulated as function, is it going to be individuals like yourself? Is it going to be a combination of individuals like yourself and actual, organizations, the people that are sourcing you? Maybe give me your thoughts. Like, who's going to be using this? What's your prediction?
I don't want to be overly optimistic about, especially my area of focus is more machine learning as opposed to robotics and computer vision, which have vast applications as well. Because I can remember the short-lived hype cycle around blockchain back in the day. And I wrote a white paper on spec that got blockchain for supply chain that got picked up upon. And I have to confess, after doing a lot of research and putting this paper together, I was more confused when I finished it than I was when I started it. And maybe that's just an indication of, my own level of technical expertise at the time. This was a while ago. But blockchain for supply chain, complete nothing burger. I'm sorry, but at the tactical level, IBM and Maersk, the largest steamship line in the world, undertook a well-publicized blockchain for supply chain initiative, and it tanked miserably. I only bring that up in the framework of the hangover effect that blockchain might have on AI, in terms of it didn't really amount to much. And I'm only talking blockchain for supply chain management. I'm not talking crypto, any of that. Obviously, that's a whole different story. But I believe, and more importantly, people that know way more about this than I do are well convinced and have demonstrated that AI is far from blockchain as it relates to business application. Its uses are endless. And again, I'm an international trade guy. So I think in terms of import, export, and domestic activities that feed into import and export activities. So bearing in mind that supply chain is an exercise in predicting the future and then adjusting to the variance that invariably shows up between what we thought was going to happen and what's really happening as it relates to forecasting sales, as it relates to sales and operations planning, which is that formal mechanism through which companies, be they importers or exporters, adjust to those variances between sales forecasts, total landed cost for imported products, vast applications. The transportation side of things, we talked about predictive analytics, a term, again, I don't want to go too far down the technical rabbit hole here, but things like cumulative lead times. It's not just variances in sales forecasts. It's any variance between a desired outcome and an actual outcome. I'm that wearing apparel importer. I sell a lot of my jeans into a branded national department store that has online sales, and they contractually have stipulated that I have an in-house date. My jeans, they don't care what happens before that, have to be in warehouses around the country by July 15th. That's a real number for companies that are in this business. It's called an in-house date. So to be in a position to use predictive analytics about the likelihood of that happening, should I place an order for jeans on factories in India versus factories in Vietnam versus a factory in Colombia that makes a lot of jeans and has a lot shorter lead time? Just think about the possibilities of applications from that perspective. So supply chain, big exercise in predicting the future. And in the end, it's not dystopian to say that supply chain is really about risk mitigation. Don't buy too much inventory so I get stuck at the end of a buying season. Don't buy too little that I miss sales. The list goes on and on and on. So lots of different applications. I'm working in specific areas myself that I happen to believe in. We don't need to talk too much in detail about those. But I believe that machine learning, and more importantly, it's already been demonstrated. There are use cases out there that clearly demonstrate the application of machine learning. Recent past, structured, unstructured data. I think that we're just getting started. Not even a growth cycle, even pre-growth. It's going to continue to roll out with applications, and the more expertise people like yourself and your colleagues and the consortium that dedicate time to learning more about supply chain, collaborating with people that can bring some of that domain expertise to the story, it's only going to be a virtuous cycle going forward. I think sky's the limit, I think.
Right. I mean, I would agree. And, maybe my statement is biased. I will say, like, blockchain, interesting that you brought that up. I remember, do you know what NFTs are? Non-fungible tokens.
Absolutely.
The whole idea of like digital assets.
Yeah.
And I've heard, like, early on in the NFT discussions, people selling not just original digital images, but like digital real estate in virtual worlds.
Yeah, was it a bridge?
I mean, I don't want any backlash. Maybe somebody invested in being that.
I have a bridge I can sell you.
But yeah, virtual bridge I could sell you. Virtual mansion, like that stuff. Again, I think the point I was trying to get to, without bashing blockchain too much, is that I don't believe that AI is a technology looking for a problem. I believe that AI is a technology that in many shapes and forms can almost, if not solve, augment some sort of problem-solving activity in almost any problem, given that the advancements that we've seen from it, right? It's multimodal. I know people tell me I use that word a lot. And it has a velocity of growth that is in the front of our eyes, is very tangible. And it's also something that we can validate very easily because it's so accessible, at least in some form, right? Like I would, if you haven't, again, I'm assuming most of our audience is a little bit tech savvy, but it could be that we run into folks that are not. And, just going to one of these large language models and working with it to see the art of the possible is always a good start to understand and to get some level of confidence in capability.
Oh, goodness. No, I can give you a quick use case on the tactical application of AI to real world scenarios where it actually works. So port drayage is the delivery and pickup of containers to and from a port. I alluded to this a little bit earlier. And ports like LA Long Beach, ports like Vancouver, New York, New Jersey, they all operate on an appointment system. You can't just show up with a truck and say, I'm here to pick up container ABC 123. You have to make an appointment. And those appointments are published by each individual terminal on each individual ocean terminal where the ships come in and berth and offload the containers on their individual websites. LA Long Beach has 13, they're two separate ports, but have a total of 13 different container terminals, all of whom have their own website, and trucking companies, drayage providers, have to go online and make appointments based on the availability of cargo. Has a container cleared through customs? Have all the duties been paid? Is it in an area where goods can be easily picked up, et cetera? And then that trucking company, that drayage company, has to align in its own system, its transportation management system, TMS as it's called, the availability of its own drivers, because drivers have hours of service limitations that are put forward by the Department of Transportation, the availability of equipment, the actual power unit, the truck, the actual chassis, a chassis that will be used to pick up. So drayage companies in a highly manual environment, although they operate in an automated TMS, that transportation management system, this is a real scenario where appointments will open up at a terminal literally at 4 o'clock in the morning. And people have to get, and it's a mad scramble. It's like everybody at Christmas time trying to get the TV. You know, they wait in line for 10 hours out in front of the store, and then it's the mad scramble. It's the same analogy there. And it's actual people that are trying to align appointments with the availability of cargo, with drivers, with chassis, with trucks. There are more than one application out there. They do the same thing, but it's always good to have more than one company competing and validating and getting better at this, where, believe it or not, through the use of AI, that the TMS has connectivity with a given ocean freight terminal or multiple terminals, can align the availability of containers through structured data, container number, bill of lading number, etc. See what appointments are available, see what drivers are available, what equipment is available, chassis, etc. How far away is the delivery point, and make appointments based on all of those factors without any human intervention whatsoever.
Do you know
that's going on today? And this is 2 years old, actually.
I'm going to ask you a technical question, and like if you don't know the details, that's perfectly fine. But do you know that are these application platforms that are performing these let's call it like routing and analysis? Are they integrated through an API, or are they scraping those interfaces? Like,
excellent question. API based, but some scraping. It started out as a scraping exercise, but there are every terminal. I want to say LA Long Beach, that there's an API to connect with. So the more modern transportation management systems have those capabilities already baked in. So the connectivity component, which I'm told is a webhook, basically, where constantly looking for information. I have a trucker that's available between 3 and 5. The power unit's going to be available as well. We know it's an hour and a half to get to the destination. And the system is looking for appointments to open up for that specific time. People are doing that manually as we speak by the thousands a day right now, just in LA Long Beach. So imagine the application moving forward. Naturally, there's a concern about the accuracy of the actions taking place, but also the replacement of humans here. There's always the downside to any type of technological advancement that is real and legitimate. But I'm talking about technologies through screen scraping originally, mostly APIs now. This has been going on for at least 2 years.
Right. And so, like, to me, and just when you first mentioned it, my mind, and if anybody listens to these, there's a few folks I have that are friends, they tell me I overuse this word, but multimodal analysis of web pages. That's something like, if you ever heard of, you're familiar with GPT a little bit, right? So GPT has a pro tier that has something called an operator agent. Mm-hmm. And with the operator agent, you can instruct it to go and essentially take control of a web browser and go to pages and execute process tasks for you. And the multimodal or the large vision model analysis of those pages is basically, it's learning as it sees the page without it having to understand where to click. Because historical scraping and clicking was, you have to go in and you have to kind of teach it exactly where to click. And if there was any nuances or changes in the look and feel, it would offset the positioning and mess up everything. And if there's anything dynamic that might change, you have to incorporate every single dynamic thing that possibly could change the flow of the clicking and the processing to to cover all the possible bases, where here you don't. It's non-deterministic, right? It's really powerful. It's not just GPT. It's not an OpenAI promotion here, but it's something that's usable. And I think it's interesting because and we're getting to softer waters here in a second, because I wanted to talk casual with you at the end of the session. But I think it's interesting because a lot of the barriers are in legacy applications. So like you said, some ports have API integration, others don't. But there's actually nothing today preventing anyone from using AI to automate the exact use case that you just articulated, because of these other new technologies that allow you to essentially interface with these websites through AI without any integration hooks. So really cool stuff. Dan, I warned you about this part of the show. This is where I get you to tell me about things a little bit that are a little bit left to the technical discussion. I'll start a little soft. What was your first wow experience with state-of-the-art AI? It doesn't have to be in supply chain. It could be I used GPT and it gave me something that I didn't expect it would give me, or whatever. I used Gemini and non-biased to any large language.
My first wow moment was one of my kids got caught cheating in school on a paper. To be honest with you.
Okay, that's a
business application, and how he or she, I don't want to identify who it is. I have 3 kids, boys and girls, so I don't want to.
Well, I'm sure they know.
Everybody in our group of 5 knows. I can assure you of that. But that's actually a true story. But more seriously, I started on the application of technology to supply chain many years ago. I've been in this business for a long time. I won't embarrass myself by saying how long. But when EDI, which still has a place, I think, what was all the rage, electronic data interchange or interface, whatever it is. So I've been at this for a while and started taking AI seriously going back 5-6 years ago, and just researching and trying to learn applications and what have you. So to answer your question from a business perspective, a big wow moment was, how long's ChatGPT been out now? Couple years?
Well, the way that they built it to this .com interface, I think it was
probably more, right?
More than I want to say 2020, 19 was.
Yeah. Okay. So it's been a minute. So one of the biggest and most important documents in international trade, they're all important, but is a purchase order. So I'm Mr. Jeans importer. If I'm going to buy 100,000 pair of jeans from a factory in India, I have to place a purchase order on them, which historically could be an email, could be an Excel spreadsheet as an email attachment, certainly EDI, 850, ANSI 850 format. So POs have been around a long time and contain a lot of really vital importance. Description of the goods, quantity, currency, country of origin, last ship date, last cancellation date, all this stuff on the PO. And it's been problematic for the technology community. Well, I shouldn't say problematic. It's taken longer than it should have to really refine how POs are used internationally between buyers and sellers of goods. Certainly caught up. But to answer your question, I went into ChatGPT because I had read somewhere that it can write programs in Python. And I just typed in, write me a program for purchase order management. I'm an importer. I place purchase orders on factories around the world. Write me a program that I can use in an AI environment that does this. And it just started like this. So I'm not a code guy, so I couldn't read the code, but you can tell by just looking closely what all the components, the key elements of that purchase order were, and it just went right down the list. Probably 99% accurate in terms of what you have to capture. Product description, item number, country of origin, quantity, currency, as we said, Incoterms rule, mode of transport, last ship date, last cancellation date. And it wrote it in Python, and there it all was. And I didn't have to be a coder because you could see what the title of essentially in a structured data environment, you could see what the name of each field was.
Right. Yeah.
I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, time to study a little bit harder. Time to learn these use cases and try to become conversant and be able to contribute to the advancement of AI for global trade." Because I've been a believer for quite some time. That's been expressed in presentations I've made, white papers I've written, pretty open about that, and continue to believe that to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. So just as a course correct, so the website went live in 2022 November. COVID is a blur for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I
GPT.
figured it was about 3 years, but certainly had been trying to learn about it ahead of time. I could show you. I'm one of these people, and one of the things I love the most about international trade is after so many years, I'm still curious to learn new things, whether it's technology related, tactical, financial, etc. And I basically I was in Five Below. This was some years ago, and they had a book for $4.99. Introduction to AI, and just kind of grew from there, and studying, trying to learn from other people, etc. I think it's been a worthwhile journey because AI is going to continue to proliferate, create value, and enhance performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a threat to jobs? Yeah, just like textile factories in Manchester, England in the 1820s replaced jobs, it's the same thing now.
I'm going to unpack that with you. I had a couple of thoughts around that. So just again, for the timeline, because I don't want to botch this, GPT-2 2019, GPT-3 2020, GPT-3.5, which to me was the largest jump in capabilities, was 2022 November.
Okay.
But so this is interesting on the topic of, I got two more areas of discussion, and you can dive in as deep or as shallow as you like in these. So the next one is that the point that you made about like jobs and shifting jobs, and like you mentioned code generation as a wow moment for you, right? When it comes to the capability of artificial intelligence. And it is to me, and probably even statistically, one of the most powerful use cases for generative large language models. And it is, to me, being head deep in the AI development world, a very powerful tool that is going to and is currently flipping software development on its head. And the cliche is, AI won't replace you, someone using AI will. And I saw some funny memes about really what that looks like, and maybe that's not always the case, and it might replace you. That's very well possible. I will say, and I think we talked about this. So World Economic Forum, another partner organization of ours, we had some interesting roundtables with a group over there about workforce development and how AI can be used for workforce development, but also AI is shifting what workforce development, career architectures look like, right? And in that, I think coming out of that, they published some sort of report in collaboration with, I don't want to say who because I'm going to botch it, but another statistical like research group. And they talked about the future skills sets of 2030. And most of those future skill sets were, I just call them like soft skills, problem solving, creative thinking, with the idea that AI will will abstract so much of the low level work that you will need to be focused on how to use it for purpose to build and to solve problems, in a structured, effective way for purpose with business value, or not if you're, using it on a test like your son or your daughter did. You didn't disclose who. But that's kind of the underlying premise. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think 2030 looks like for the for the workforce that you have the closest pulse into in trade and supply chain, and how does it look like with AI? Are we seeing humanoid robots walking around? Are we seeing automation replacing a lot of these tasks? What are your thoughts?
Like any technology, let's go, post World War II forward, from mainframe computers to desktops to, tablets and all the different types, the internet, and of course AI and what have you. It is inevitable, I think, at an accelerated pace, that certain jobs that require analysis, interpretation of data, make predictions based on data, and even decisions based on data, no human mind can compete with an AI-enabled computer. It's just that simple. So things like financial analysis that are already and have been for many years looking to uncover patterns in past data that are relevant to future outcomes, certainly applicable in a financial world, and most definitely applicable in the supply chain world. Yeah, jobs will be replaced. Jobs will be created. I have these conversations with my 3 kids, even the one that I caught cheating. I forgave him or her some years ago, and hopefully instilled some additional values as part of the process. But they're all in there from 20 to 27 and one in between. And I only bring this up because we have these conversations because 2 of them work in one of our businesses that we have in global trade. And what is AI going to do to a 20-year-old in, when he or she graduates college, or a 24-year-old who's just starting his or her career? And it comes down to this. And I'll start at the general and get to the very specific. What I've learned in international trade is that whether it's a country, an industry, a company within an industry, and most importantly, the individuals that work in companies or entrepreneurs that have their own companies, you have to be able to compete. This is what gets lost in this whole tariff conversation. That's a different discussion to have, but tariffs aren't going to force people to buy. So that's a different conversation. You have to have products and services that people are willing to pay a price for, and hopefully at a premium. And that starts with the skills that an individual person brings to the table within an organization, and realize that AI is going to replace a lot of work. And I, as an individual, have to do the best I can to prepare myself for the rigors of competing in a new world. And that's just the way it goes. So if indeed AI is going to replace jobs that are data intensive, certainly labor intensive, naturally there's a big difference between automation and AI, another conversation for another day. One of the most important elements, and I can only speak to global trade, but it's a big net that we're casting here. It's a knowledge-based business. It's the application of acquired knowledge to specific scenarios, the ability to compete. And what international trade really comes down to is trust. And trust is a very human thing. So to be able to build trust with customers, with suppliers, with third parties, through credibility building, through very human activities, relationship management. If somebody in the supply chain has a problem and it's mission critical, are they going to ask their AI agent, or are they going to call up their friend that can solve a problem with them because they're the one who runs the terminal at 3:00 in the morning and they're the ones that can open up an appointment? I think we know the answer to that question. So I think AI will replace jobs on an accelerated basis. Unfortunately, I would have to say yes to that, but it just ups the game. When I came out of high school, and I thank her to this day, bless her soul, my mother put me in typing class in high school because she thought I was going to go to work for the civil service and be in a typing pool. This was way before desktops and what have you, but that's a transferable skill. I don't know how many words a minute I can type now, but I can type like a madman. And that's been really helpful in my career. That's one skill. You speak 3 languages. That might come in handy in the world of international trade. So you have to develop skills based on the environment you find yourself in. And AI is a threat to jobs. Make no mistake about it, but it's going to create even more jobs. You have to be able to make those adjustments, acquire those skills, and stay in the game. I've been in this, as I said, long time, and try to learn something new every day, become more competitive every day, become someone's always nipping at your heels. That's the essence of the human experience. If you can't compete you're done. And that's just the way it is. And that's the message that I convey to my students. I've been an adjunct professor my whole life. It's certainly what I convey to my young kids. And it's the advice for anyone who's willing to listen in global trade. You better be ready to be able to compete. And to do that, you better know a little something about AI and how you can bring human skills to the table to complement the abilities of AI. Otherwise, you're going to be heavily discounted.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more about the human abilities, and I read, speaking of like using this without purpose, again, came across this recently on like studies on declining cognitive ability of people that are relying entirely on large language models to build out, content or otherwise like research, and also like declining ability to retain knowledge effectively. So yeah, problem solving and creative thought are important as the basis for skill sets to build for purpose, but that doesn't negate having to learn. Even if GPT can do it for you or Gemini can do it for you.
Oh, I worry about that a lot.
So that's for sure. And I think you're on point. Like human elements of interactions are important. You don't get those. You won't get those from these types of technologies, not at the level. And you also get societal counterbalances. Like similarly, I've read research around predictions on how, for example, public venues and events will become more and more popular because it's one of the only areas that really cannot be replaced with synthetic generative AI technology, right? So going to a public sports game, a concert, an opera, those are going to be more popular amongst certain people in society. And there's also going to be groups of people that are going to reject anything that is built with AI, even if it's built better.
Sure.
And you have to kind of understand that, there's a reason for it. Some of them it's grounded in belief systems or otherwise. So the idea is to bring this technology, but the technology should help people, right? It's not, otherwise it serves no purpose if it doesn't help people, right?
Yeah.
So however that is,
we have to up our game continuously, especially in an accelerated AI environment. I don't think there's any really way around that. And again, I can only speak to global trade and my own experience and the experience of people whose opinion I value a great deal. And if there's one recurring theme in 39 years in global trade, it's the ability to compete. Right. Countries, industries, companies, and individuals. And developing your own skill set and adjusting to things that you can't control. Am I going to stop the flow of AI? I don't think so. So you can make a decision if it's real or not. As you just said, some folks maybe believe that it isn't, and that's fine. But if you make a fundamental decision that this is the real deal and I better get on the stick, then that's what you're going to do. Otherwise, things won't be the same in a very short period of time.
Right, exactly, yeah. So we're coming at the end then of our session, and I wanted to get a chance to thank you and to kind of conclude on our discussion in the 2 minutes that we have left. So, Dan, like I mentioned, you're part of our initiative within the AI Applied Consortium.
I am.
As a domain expert, a very recognized, credible, and helpful domain expert. You've been very willing and open to support us. So I wanted to thank you both for coming on this podcast and for supporting our AI Tariff 360 initiative.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For those of you that are listening, if you're interested in specifically the Tariff 360 initiative, there's ways to reach out to us through our website, through our LinkedIn pages that will allow you to participate in beta trials or just ask more questions. Dan, hopefully I'll have you on sometime in the future. You've set a high standard now for our guests. So in fact, the next two guests that we have planned are the former chief data scientist of Halliburton, that's also a supply chain expert, and an executive from Visa that's also a participating member.
Excellent.
Of our consortium. In no particular order, we'll be announcing those. But once again, Dan, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. and getting
Same
it
here.
done.
Happy to be part of the team. Pleasure to be on and be challenged with these subjects and just to continue the journey. And in the meantime, happy early 4th of July. This is our 249th birthday of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Next year will be 250.
250,
So,
the big
exciting
250.
stuff. Yeah.
Great stuff. Yeah. Thank you, Dan, again. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And happy
Stay
4th.
safe out there.
Stay safe.
All right, you guys. Thank you.